Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is The Take for Market Rebellion on a Wednesday, hump day. Well, interesting day because of the fact that it's a shortened week. So oftentimes when we were on the trading floor back in the day, we used to call it Synthetic Thursday because tomorrow will be an expiration, July 2nd. That'll be the expiration. So we're kicking off the month of July, but let's look back at the month of June. Really huge volume month, a lot of volatility. And we found ourselves in all kinds of different themes that were playing out. It seemed like day after day, we had huge volumes, then we'd pull back a little bit in volume. We've had big spikes in volatility, then we'd have a little bit of a pullback. We had some dramatic moves intraday, it seemed like very consistently, and some really choppy markets over the last week or 2 weeks, call it, in the month of June. So here we are kicking off the month of July, but looking back for just a moment. Yesterday, really interesting day. Now, across the board, a nice performance. Last 10, 15 minutes, we saw a bit of a sell-off from those highs, but that's something that just sort of plays into the themes that we'd seen throughout June, except for this was in a very compacted, very short range. Oftentimes, we were seeing the final hour, final 2 hours, maybe even the last half hour, 45 minutes. This was about a 10 or a 15-minute pullback from those highs, but you look at the Dow, still finished up about 2%. I look over at the S&P 500, up about 1.5%. NASDAQ up about 2%. So you get the idea. A pretty nice move across the board in all the major indices. Also had gold hitting 1,800. You had oil over $40. You had the volatility indexes I talk about a lot. We look at that volatility index. We talk about ranges all the time, 31 to 36. Finished on the lower end of the range yesterday. As a matter of fact, looking at it today, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, but looking at it today, we actually are breaking through 30. Now, what was really the catalyst that was really pushing the markets? The good news is there were multiple areas, a very broad move to the upside, and something that so many guys weren't talking about, the broadness of this rally from the lows, from where we really got pushed down to. Now, yes, there's been times where we've had leadership from the Power Five, but outside of that Power Five, we've also had a great broad move to the upside. Now we're starting to hear more and more people talk about, wow, we got this big this has been going on for a while. It's biotechs, it's semiconductors. It's not just 5 companies in the technology, it's technology in general. Take a look at so many of these various cloud names, of course, those names. But yesterday, semiconductors really were a powerful mover. We had those Micron earnings, but you had Xilinx up about 7%, Western Dig up about 5%, Micron up nearly 5%, Lam Research, AMD, NVIDIA, Intel, all of them. Intel up near that $60 level once again. Technology had a pretty nice day as well. Microsoft, Cisco, you look at Apple, still trading. Matter of fact, Apple on that nice bounce and that push up through that 360 level, and it just continues to move to the upside. Even if it's choppy, it's moving to the upside generally, and it's pretty impressive. Look at healthcare names as well. United Health and Merck also pushing up. When you look over at the XLV, financials up about 1.5%, but led by Goldman Sachs yesterday when they're looking at the XLF up about 1.5%. Great broad participation. Now, the one area where you had a little bit of a drag, Boeing. And Boeing's had some huge moves to the upside, and then some other days where it's actually pulled a little bit to the downside, and that was down a little bit over about 5%. But we've seen this monstrous company up as much as 14, 15% just the other day. So really does have some major moves, and a lot of folks, the volumes there have been pretty extraordinary as well. Really low trading session yesterday to close up the month of June, only about 25 million. And I say only, but in any other world, that would be huge numbers. But June has had some massive numbers. The averages per day were incredible. And so 25 million just felt like kind of a slower kind of a day. And it really did, as we've seen so many days in the 30 million plus, even over 40 million. So you get the idea. 25 million does feel a little bit slower, even though those are magnificent numbers. Now, overnight, markets had huge pressure overnight, huge. Coming into today, into the morning, into the early hours, we were down anywhere from 100 to 250 points. Then some news about Pfizer talking about their potential of what they're seeing in a vaccine. When we're talking about the production potential as well of huge dosage, and they're talking about 1.2 billion doses by 2021, but some strong immune response in the human trial. So a lot of really good news. That completely flipped the markets. Matter of fact, we were up just about 150 points just moments ago. I'm looking over now. We've given up about 100 points. So really short-term reaction. But again, we've seen this before. We've seen this with Gilead. We've seen this with so many of the different biotechs that have been working on. There's so many different folks in the healthcare world that are working on vaccines and all sorts of drugs, all of these things. And we've seen this reaction before. So what really reacted immediately? Airlines, cruise ships, casinos, the typical names, all powering the S&P and the Dow across the board. You look and you'll see a lot of those types of names that are really jumping in. Not in the Dow so much, NASDAQ and the S&P for sure. But what are the names that were higher, at least moments ago, but some of the names higher? You got some tech names out there as well. Some of the big names. You have Apple and Amazon and Facebook and Tesla and Netflix. Microsoft already was a little bit weaker. I'm sure right now it's actually pushing down even a little bit more maybe at this point. But I'll tell you, Pfizer, a nice, big, solid move leading the Dow. Actually, it was up about 4% before we came on the air. And then you had Boeing pulling on the Dow a little bit. But Boeing, it's up. You know, it's been pretty impressive because it was pulling on the markets yesterday. It's contributing a little bit today, but for how long? As we've given up some of this, I just wonder if Boeing, and I haven't seen it go by, but I will. If I see that go by, we'll update. But Boeing was up a little 3%, Raytheon up about 1%, but really a lot of those healthcare names leading to the upside. Now, semiconductors that have been such a leadership role, even with the markets when they were up strong, they were off a little bit. And technology was kind of dragging along. It was participating, but those names that I mentioned was really what was really pushing technology to the upside. But it was dragging, relatively speaking, towards the S&P and the Dow in that big move, specifically in the Dow. So that was something. Energy moving a little bit higher. That's been a pretty bright spot as well. And so there's all kinds of different areas in the marketplace participating. And obviously, as we look through this whole thing, Caterpillar, that's up about 1%, just close to 1% right now as well. So industrials, some participation, but a lot of what we're seeing right now, healthcare, and obviously a lot of those names that are connected with if we can find any kind of vaccine, if we can find a drug, if we can find some of what we've been looking for so diligently, and every single company it seems like is involved as they're looking. Whenever there is some good news, you start to see a lot of those travel and leisure type names that really do react. Now, I did talk about yesterday and some of the participation of all kinds of different segments of the marketplace. I'm going to give you Citi today as my unusual option activity. Now, Citi hit yesterday, later in the afternoon, some August calls, way out of the money calls. They were the August 60 calls yesterday. Some decent size in there, looking for maybe Citi to make some kind of a move, giving it a little bit of a time. But today, a little bit shorter term. We're talking about just a week out, July 10th. We're looking at the July 52 calls. Stock was trading a little lower than that, around 51 and a half, call it. And they were buying these calls for about $1.40. Now, about 3,000 of those. Not a huge trade. We see much bigger trades very frequently. As a matter of fact, that big trade yesterday in the August 60s was a much bigger trade than this one. But seeing this 2 days in a row and seeing a very, very short term, and this is not looking for a monstrous move. As I mentioned, stock trading around 51 and a half. These are the 52 calls. There is potential there. So I just wanted to highlight that because we're always looking for an unusual option activity early in the session. I want to get this takeout a little bit early, and I'm shooting to get it in the first hour or less. Today, I think we're only 30 minutes into the trading session, so it gives you a little bit of an idea of how early I'm shooting for. Trying to get this out early, give people a little bit of a roadmap for the day, look back just for a moment and see what happened yesterday, and just provide you with as much information as possible. Now, understand the derivatives world. Get educated. If you don't understand it, get your education going. We've got great people at Market Rebellion, but you've got to have education. If you don't, the experience is not going to be good, and you're going to just walk away from the area of the marketplace that does have all the growth. So you do want to gain that knowledge. Knowledge is king. I'm Pete Najarian. This is The Take for Market Rebellion.